now, coming to you live from Huntsville Attic Studios, it's Pop Culture Philosophers. And here are your hosts, Rockin, Robbie, Billups, and John Hammertime Holshoe.
Hey everybody, it's the Pop Culture Philosophers. Coming to you as always from the Huntsville Attic in beautiful Huntsville, Alabama. Today we'll be talking about 80s TV. That's right, the decade of excess on the small screen. As always, I'm John Hammertime Holshoe. With me, Rockin' Robbie Billups.
Oh, Rockin' Robbie Billups, as always, here, excited guys to talk about 80s TV. John, I'm super excited. Thanks for having me. This is going to be a great show. I am super hyped for it, are you not?
I am, man. I didn't realize how much I love 80s TV and how much it influenced me growing up until I went back and watched all these shows. I mean, they did really... Unfortunately, TV shaped me more than it should have.
Yeah.
And as a child of the 80s, of course.
Well, absolutely. And I think that's essential to the 80s. And obviously, we'll get to that. But that was like, you know, television had a lot to do with bringing up people in the 80s. And we were brought up in the 80s. And I'm very excited to talk about 80s television. With us, we have, as usual, Justin Goldsmith.
Hey.
Excited to talk about 80s TV, Justin?
I am indeed.
Me too. And first timer, everybody, we're popping his PCP cherry. It's Jeremie Day.
What's up, everybody? It's good to be on the show.
Thanks for joining us, man.
Thank you so much for joining us, man. It's super exciting to have you here, Jeremie, and talk about 80s TV.
So before we get talking about actors, actresses, favorite shows, I just want to reach out there and ask, who would, if you were in 80s TV, what 80s TV universe would you want to exist in? Like, what show did you watch? If you can go back in time and say, you know what, I wish I lived in that world, which is a weird question. But that's how we're going to start the show.
Yeah,
it's only weird because
I think it's a good question. Which TV world from the 80s would you live in? I think it's a great question.
Right. I'm going to start with newcomer, Jeremie.
Okay, so if I could be part of the A-Team, definitely the A-Team universe.
Oh, the A-Team.
If I was part of the A-Team only, though, but if I was just some random guy in the universe, no thanks.
Now, would you be would you be yourself, or would you want to be one of the members already there?
I thought about this. I would be Mr. T's son.
Oh, B.A. Jr.
V.A.
Little
Jr.
T.
Yeah.
Little T.
Little T.
Little T.
What about you?
That's a good answer.
What about you, Goldsmith? Which universe would you want to exist in? I'm gonna assume that it's one in space, but
it's Star Trek, man.
It is Star Trek.
That was a no-brainer for me.
So
and
next gen started in the 80s, right? What year did Next Gen start?
87.
87.
87.
Yeah. I actually figured this was a trick question that Robbie wrote so that we could just talk about Star Trek at the beginning of the show.
Visually, I'm going to say, going back and looking at Next Gen, it's hard to believe it was an 80s show. I thought it was a 90s show because visually, it's fantastic.
Yeah, actually, until, a year or so ago, I thought it came out in 89 and was mostly in the 90s.
What about you, Robbie?
Well, I mean, Star Trek is a very obvious answer. And Star Trek would be my first answer. I think Star Trek is dope. And my other answer would be Cheers. Yeah. Because I think I've actually lived that sitcom before. You know? Like just being a regular at a bar and just, it's fun. But my ultimate answer would be a combination of the two. I'd be the guy at Star Trek hanging out at 10 Forward all the time.
Whoopi Goldberg.
Yep.
Oh, hanging out at the bar.
Hanging out with Whoopi Goldberg. I would be Whoopi Goldberg's Norm. I would be the Morn of TNG.
The Morn.
What about you, John?
Can we count animated?
Yeah,
if
sure.
you asked
absolutely.
me as a kid, one of my favorite cartoons, and the universe I wanted to live in, which in retrospect would be a terrible universe to live in, Masters of the Universe, He-Man.
That would be a terrible place to live.
Yeah, from I don't know anything about fighting with swords or starting fires, and they had the loincloths, and they probably had disease. That was terrible.
I don't know. If you lived in Eternia, it was pretty cushy there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it seemed pretty cushy. Especially if you're part of the royal consort and all that, right?
I wouldn't be,
Definitely.
though. I would be stuck.
You know, He-Man is a 1% elitist bastard if you really look at that show. He wasn't for the people.
He's not really the best prince. Also, did you know that He-Man somehow could compete with pre-crisis Superman? So it tells you how strong he is.
He's super strong.
Yeah, he's pretty strong.
Speaking of He-Man, animated television, cartoons, if you will, in the 80s.
I was hoping you would say, I remind you of him.
No. You remind me a little bit of Granger. Is that the cat's name before he becomes badass and Battle Cat? Is it Granger or whatever? You're more like the Cowardly Lion of He-Man, but
Put him up.
I think I'm more of an Orko myself. But anyway, Jeremie is a man at arms for sure, and Justin is, of course, the Beast Man of the bunch.
I thought it'd be many faces.
Anyway, I don't understand what you're trying to say about Justin right there, but
I don't either.
That brings us to cartoons, animation in the 80s. I think the 80s is one of the greatest decades for animated television. I mean, absolutely, guys. You got to think about it. All the stuff that we love so much. Now, why did it happen? I believe it happened actually because they realized, holy cow, we can sell toys through cartoons. We can sell toys through TV. And this was kind of like the first time they really put that together. You had TV shows that were based on toy lines. The toy line came first, like with Transformers or G.I. Joe.
Well, it's because they had all the plastics in the 70s, late 60s, and all through the 70s, and they finally figured out what to do with it.
Yeah, right.
They made toys.
But it worked, man. As a child of the 80s, it worked on me. I was addicted to He-Man toys, Transformers, Thundercats, GoBots. Like a crazy person. I loved tons of these toys when I was a kid. What are some of your recollections of animation in the 80s, and what are some of your favorite shows? And I'm going to start with Justin.
The first one I think of is actually Scooby Doo and Scrappy Doo, because I'm pretty sure that's when Scrappy Doo was introduced.
But there was like an original Scooby Doo in the 80s, I believe. Yeah,
80s. But I actually, when I was a kid, I didn't watch a ton of animated stuff. I watched like old Nick at Night and stuff like that, and TV Land.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about
you were
animation.
such a bizarre child.
No, I watched Scooby Doo, and I remember. I think I remember seeing Hanna-Barbera's World of Super Adventure. They had like Birdman and Galaxy Trio. And that was where Space Ghost came from.
Well, those are probably definitely like that. Those were shows like from older decades, though, right? And they were just re-released in the 80s.
Possibly.
I think so. But that's the stuff that you watched in the 80s, the repeats of those for sure, yeah. Because they were repackaged and put together. But Scooby-Doo, I do think there was like some original Scooby-Doo in the 80s, I think, absolutely. What about you, Jeremie? What are some of your favorite 80s cartoons and like just memories of that moment?
Oh, man. So, definitely DuckTales.
Oh, yeah.
One of the best theme songs for a 80s cartoon ever. And at the time when I was younger, I didn't realize it was an 80s show. I thought it was from the 90s.
Yeah, it started in like 87.
Yeah, I didn't even know that. But yeah, definitely DuckTales and A Pup Named Scooby Doo. That's the show. And yes, I loved A Pup Named Scooby Doo a lot as well. That's one that came out in the 80s that I really loved. And
I loved A Pup Named Scooby Doo.
Yeah,
I'm not going to lie.
Oh, the theme song, man. See, that's the one thing about 80s cartoons is those theme songs. I think that's what drew us all in.
Yeah.
It's the theme song. So, and definitely like Voltron, of course.
Voltron.
Yes. Anything that was made to sell toys, definitely. Transformers, of course. GoBots, definitely. Transformers always had Devastator, the toy. Oh. Remember, all the Constructicons could unite into Devastator?
Yeah.
So I would always have four of them, I think. Well, however many you need. So I'd always have one less than I needed to make full Devastator.
Oh, that
was very frustrating.
Well, that's something you have to do in your adult life is finally complete Devastator.
Most definitely. I need to get on that sometime soon.
Speaking of Devastator, John, you devastate everything around you. What are some of your favorite 80s cartoons and memories of the time?
No, I'm sad. Inspector Gadget.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's an 80s cartoon that, whether you like them or not, everybody's watched Inspector Gadget. And they know Claw, the bad guy, and they know Penny, his niece or whatever, and that dog who's always getting him out of trouble.
For whatever reason, I thought that was a 70s show.
It's an 80s show.
80s.
Yeah, it's 80s.
Yeah, I watched that too.
I watched that like crazy when I was a child, man.
So Inspector Gadget, I was a big fan of. I think everybody likes Inspector Gadget. I didn't realize till years later that it's the same dude from Get Smart.
Yeah, Don Adams.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
It's the same
know
voice,
that.
and it makes sense because now he's got the gadgets. Whatever. I mean, I didn't know that as a kid. I watched reruns of Get Smart later on, but I never put two and two as a kid.
Yeah.
Together, Dungeons and Dragons cartoon in the 80s.
Yeah, there was.
an
Yeah.
awesome cartoon.
Oh man, it's so great.
And one of my favorites was in the mid 80s. Nintendo dominated the 80s. And then they had a cartoon called Captain N, the Game Master, which is very short-lived.
Oh, Captain! I thought you were about to bring out the Super Mario Brothers show, but
and there was a short-lived Super Mario Brothers, and there was a short-lived Zelda. But Captain N was the one I watched all the time, and he had the gun, and all these different characters appeared. Not just necessarily Nintendo characters, but other characters from Nintendo games. Even Capcom characters appeared. So that, and then of course, like I said earlier, He-Man and Masters Universe. I was obsessed with He-Man as a kid, and I had all the figures, and I had Snake Mountain, and I had Castle Grayskull. I had so much stuff.
Oh, you were that privileged little shit that had a Castle Grayskull and Snake Mountain?
I had
oh, my God.
All that
I had
privilege.
So much He-Man stuff, man. He-Man was it. And
Dude, that stuff was so cool, though.
Yeah, and when I went to my cousin's house, she had a cartoon channel, and they ran She-Ra, and I'm like, holy shit.
She-Ra, Princess of Power.
Yeah, so He-Man was where it was at for me as a kid, man, in the 80s.
Absolutely. I mean, you guys really hit the nail on the head with a lot of those shows. A few more I will throw out there. Actually, a lot more that we didn't talk about. Thundercats when I was a kid, I just adored Thundercats.
Yeah,
I
everybody
thought it
had
was
that toy
cool.
fucking sword.
And it's one of the few ones I think that actually holds up today. I think
Indeed.
if you rewatch the original Thundercats, it still holds up. Sword of Omens.
Most
Absolutely.
definitely.
Thundercats. Oh my God. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, that was late 80s, but you're right, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles,
Yeah.
and that was huge
Yeah.
when it came out.
Heathcliff was one of my favorites in the 80s. Muppet Babies, man.
I forgot about Muppet
Oh,
Babies.
man.
Muppet
That's 80s.
Babies.
I love
and I
that.
love the Muppet Babies because of all the pop culture references. Speaking of badass toys, Dino Riders.
Oh,
Oh,
dude.
man, I remember
Oh
that.
my
Yeah.
goodness, right? Do. Alvin and the Chipmunks, one of my favorite
Oh, yeah.
cartoons
That's
in the
one
80s.
I didn't realize was an 80s show either.
Yeah. The Real Ghostbusters,
Most
a
definitely.
great toy line as well. Pound
Oh, yeah.
Puppies, I actually really did
I
like.
love Pound Puppies.
Okay. Of course, Transformers. Smurfs was one of the biggest deals in the 80s of animation. Adventures of the Gummy Bears, and don't ever forget about Denver, the Last Dinosaur. But my all-time absolute favorite, if I had to pick one, I would pick two. It'd be Jim and the Holograms. Truly outrageous.
If you have to pick one, you would pick two.
Yes. It'd be Jim, and it would be Tally Ho! Silverhawks, my number
Oh,
one.
man.
Come on, guys.
I love the Silverhawks toys. Although, all mine, the chrome chipped off.
Of
or
course,
wore
because
off.
we banged them against each
Yeah.
other. But Monstar was one of the first flip head action figures I remember having, and I just adored it. I absolutely loved it. And plus, those animated TV shows from the 80s have some of the best theme songs still today.
They
Most
do.
definitely.
Yeah, they do have awesome songs, awesome toys. You're right. It was really I wonder if we missed out on some potentially good cartoons because they couldn't market toys or didn't tie in with toys. But it
Yeah,
was
right.
since it was a decade of excess. You're right. It was if we can sell a toy line, let's make a show or vice
Centurions
versa.
is another good one.
Centurions was huge.
Can I
yeah.
go back and revisit the D&D cartoon real quick?
I
Yeah.
love the D&D.
Okay, so I don't know if you ever realized it. So as someone that plays D&D, going back and looking at that show as an adult, seeing these kids, these level 1 character kids, go back and fight Tiamat, that's the first encounter they have. They will wipe a party. How are these kids? They fought every single monster that is powerful, very powerful in the monster manual. And they were definitely a level 1 party at the time.
That's
So
why.
you're-
That's why I didn't like the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon. I thought it was a little unrealistic.
You're
For-
calling
for
bullshit
D&D, yes.
80s kids cartoon.
I mean,
That Inspector Gadget shit could have happened, but this D&D cartoon.
it's
No
unrealistic
fucking way.
within the
Dino
rules.
Riders is the most realistic. Come on.
Most definitely. Cadillacs and dinosaurs.
Yo.
Speaking of great theme songs, not only did you have all those great animated shows, but there's a lot of great theme songs for live action.
Disguise.
There's tons of great live action songs. I mean,
Come along with the snort.
you may not
I'm
remember.
sorry, I'm still in animation.
You may not remember certain shows in detail, but you remember a lot of the theme songs. Like everybody knows the Cheers theme song, for example.
Yeah.
So I'd like to talk about favorite theme songs because some hold up really well, some are not so great, but some hold up incredibly well and are just part of American culture. You know what I'm saying? Some of these songs. So I'm going to start with actually Goldsmith. Is there any particular songs other than the Next Generation song?
Well, there's that.
Which is a great song, what we associate most with Star Trek now.
Yeah.
Music-wise.
It's the Star Trek theme, even more so than the original Star Trek theme.
Absolutely.
Then you got the ones I picked, aside from Cheers, that's what I put it on my list too. And Macgyver, really good theme song.
I actually didn't watch a lot of Macgyver.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Sorry.
He was
All
so
right.
dreamy,
It was
though.
boring to me when I was a kid.
I agree.
I'm not gonna lie, I went and watched some recently, but the dialogue is what makes it boring.
I'm sure I didn't notice that when I was a kid. Though. When I'm 5 years old, I'm like, oh, the dialogue in this show.
I was just waiting for him to do something crazy to get out of the situation he's in. And that's why I watched it, but I watched it as a kid religiously.
The A-Team, of course. I'm gonna include Taxi because a good portion of it was in the early 80s.
Yeah, his last bit was in the 80s
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
That Angel, that's a really good theme song. And I'm also, I don't care what you say, I'm counting Quantum Leap as an 80s show. Because even into 1994, when they showed the future stuff, like when it showed Al going around outside the complex, it's clear that 1999 that they're in is actually in the 80s.
Yeah.
Like the design, the clothes and everything. Yeah, totally 80s. And an amazing theme song.
Robbie, which theme songs stand out to you, good sir?
Well, I mean, Star Trek.
Yeah, it was a great. It is a great
come
song.
on. I mean, it's from the Star Trek movie that Jerry Goldsmith did, but they picked that theme from that, and it is Star Trek to me, absolutely. More so than the original one, absolutely. Cheers, of course.
Yes.
Who doesn't like Cheers? I mean, it's fun. It's a great bar song. It's a great karaoke song. You get everybody excited. I'm also going to mention I love all of the music in Miami Vice, like all of it, especially Crockett's theme by Jan Hammer, Jan Hammer.
I can't remember the artist, but I know
Jan
the
Hammer
song
or Jan Hammer. Yeah, I think it's Jan Hammer. But dude,
it's on the Vice City
MC
soundtrack.
Hammer's dad.
yes, it's so good. Knight Rider, of course, has a really cool theme song. There's some really great sitcom theme songs I really like Charles in Charge.
Charles in charge of our... I can't remember the lyrics of that song.
But if I had to pick one, I would pick two. No, I'm just kidding. I would pick one
God
this
damn
time,
it.
and it's Airwolf. Airwolf to me, that
like electronic, like video game almost soundtrack.
Yes, it sounds like an NES video game. It's just, I love it. Even today, I still listen to it, and it gets me hyped, dude. It's like a good, like, fired up, get ready to go and party or just like tear something out. Like, I don't know. Airwolf gets me pumped, man.
Maybe it's because it's electronic, but whenever I hear it, I want to go to an arcade.
Yeah.
For some reason. It's that, or maybe it's just that nostalgia of the 80s and arcades being so, prevalent thing. Yeah.
For some reason, I just had a visual of you getting out at a big frat party or something with that booming in your car and everybody just kind of looking at you.
In your helicopter.
You know that everybody would be like, that's dope. Plus, Airwolf actually had a really cool handheld video game in the 80s that I had. Like, Airwolf was cool. I actually liked Airwolf.
That was a big thing of merchandise.
Macgyver was boring to me. Airwolf was not.
Well, Airwolf did have toys. And
Airwolf had that fucking helicopter, man.
Yeah.
Come on.
That was, the helicopter is what made the show.
But the song made the show.
Yeah. Well,
The song made the show. That was definitely the song.
What was your favorite theme song or theme song that stands out in your mind, Jeremie?
So, Full House for sure. Full House.
yeah.
I have a thing for just any kind of, a lot of the sitcom theme songs for sure. A lot of them are just awesome. And the Growing Pains. So catchy. I love Growing Pains, but I love the theme song more. Like, I watched Growing Pains pretty well, but show me that smile. But yes, see, exactly.
The theme song was way better than the show, by the way.
Yeah, the show is good, but the theme song.
It's got Kirk Cameron in it. Dreaming Kirk Cameron.
And
later on, didn't have a little baby Leonardo DiCaprio.
It did. It did have little baby Leo.
The other younger brother in that show got really pissed
later
off.
on.
Got really pissed off about that.
And that's what turned him to drugs. Actually, I think he did go bad like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
He broke bad.
But also Knight Rider, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Any synth-driven music just in the 80s was so good for some reason.
Yeah.
So good.
What about you, John?
Well, we already said Cheers, which is fantastic.
Which had a different theme song. Like the original song was way different.
Yeah.
And there's other verses that are so weird.
Yeah, talking about the wet
when your husband wants to be a girl.
Yeah, it's definitely So I didn't realize they had changed the lyrics part way through, but the lyrics I think people remember. And again, I think I've seen either Netflix or the box set or whatever. I think they went back to the one that people know. I don't think you can even get the original. No, I'm sure maybe reruns or something have the original lyrics, but they changed it part way through the series. But it's a great song. It's a classic song. Yeah, you're right. People do karaoke and stuff like that. And then Night Court. What about that saxophone?
Oh,
boom,
boom. Night Court's a great show. Man.
Yeah, and Night Court was a great show, but it had a great song. And it wasn't even that great a song. It's just, it stuck with you is the thing. And, it's a big, like if you were a saxophone player, like, finally, I'm being recognized. And then one of my favorite songs that actually got covered in a song was With a Little Help from My Friends. So there's
Wonder Years.
Yeah, Joe Cocker covering the Beatles, the Wonder Years, and his version is obviously a different take on it.
Have you ever seen him performing that song at Woodstock?
No,
you should watch that because it's really funny. That dude is so obviously so high out of his gourd. At parts, he's just going, like, watch it. I'm not even kidding.
I will check it out. But I really like that. I really like that cover. It's a great song in its own right. It's a famous Beatles song.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I ever mention the song, people are like, oh, that Joe Cocker song. I'm like, I will fucking murder you. It's a Beatles song. What are you, Bob Dylan?
But
there were some fantastic songs on the show. If you're listening to the to the show right now, this episode, and we missed one, post it below on the site or on I don't know, wherever you're listening.
And we'll be right back here with we're going to talk about some of our favorite actors and sitcoms and maybe a little bit of MTV, because we all want our MTV. Right after this break here on Pop Culture Philosophers. Be right back. Hey everybody, Rockin' Robbie here. I want to talk to you real quick about our YouTube channel. That's right, you got to get on YouTube and check out Pop Culture Philosophers and give us a good subscribe. That's right, we got tons of content there for you. Weekly comic book reviews and other comic book news and things like that. Movie reviews and movie discussions and updates and stuff like that. Toy reviews and toy unboxings, both new toys and retro toys. Lots of fun, exciting stuff, including the exclusive to YouTube podcast, Rockin' with Rockin' Robbie. Tons of stuff going on at the Pop Culture Philosophers YouTube channel, including our 500 subscribers celebration going on right now. We got a contest we are announcing. Check it out. You might be able to win a Blu-ray player and Rogue One, a Star Wars story on Blu-ray. So be sure to check that out on YouTube, Pop Culture Philosophers.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Pop Culture Philosophers. We're talking about 80s TV and what was more prevalent in 80s than sitcoms. This is definitely the era of the sitcom, as well as just the 80s defined excess. And Oscar Wilde once said, nothing says success like excess. And that was true of the 80s, Reaganomics. Yeah. And there was a lot of, there was.
For some people.
Sitcoms were very prevalent at the time. And you had the most of them were the family-oriented sitcom. You had a moral story, don't do drugs or don't go to the neighbor's house because he molests little kids or whatever. There was always some sort of...
That was a theme. There was a Different Strokes episode. Yeah.
I remember a Mr. Belvedere having that.
Oh, Mr. Belvedere.
So they all had these, it was the classic sitcom family, but it was during the 80s too. We've got... AIDS and
they're still trying to push that fucking Republican white bread shit on us, man.
Sad.
But during the 80s, you got the AIDS outbreak epidemic. You've got cocaine, other drugs become more prevalent, and so they're trying to make
crack
this wholesome family sitcom, and people are shutting off the real world and watching. Not the real world, the show. That didn't come about yet. But people are turning a blind eye to the real problems of the world and turning to these family sitcoms.
It was definitely escapist into this fantasy of what the American family was.
And so you got a lot of these traditional family sitcoms, and as you progress through the 80s, people become bored of that, and so now you have a spin on the 80s sitcom. So now it's a family sitcom, but they have an alien living with them. Or it's a family sitcom, and they have a robot daughter living with them.
Or they have two dads.
Not one, but two. Which now doesn't seem so absurd, but I guess it was what a hilarious concept in the 80s.
Yeah.
Paul Reiser, and then the other guy nobody remembers, Wham.
He's actually like George Michael Light.
Yeah.
Was the other
I wonder
dad.
if the other guy was the guy from Wham. So why sitcoms is what I ask, is that sitcoms were the biggest thing, or variations of sitcom. Oh, we're a family, but we got 10 kids. Oh my God. So why sitcoms? Why were they so prevalent? Prevalent. I can't say that word also.
Prevalent.
He's not wrong. It is prevalent.
It is prevalent. In my defense, I've been drinking. Not that much either.
You had about a thimble.
Shut the fuck. The people listening do not know that. So why were sitcoms so popular in the 80s? I'm going to start with Jeremie. Why were they the mainstay of TV?
Oh, because they did provide very good escapism. It was a time, I guess, where people really needed that in their lives. And I would say 80s sitcoms are more varied than the entertainment we have now. With our current programming, it's kind of stagnant sometimes. But in the 80s, until it started getting wild, like you said, later into, it started getting a little bit out of control. But for a long time, I think it was what they needed then, what we needed back then. It was just bona fide escapism. And on top of all that, on top of just the escapism part of it, just awesome programming. Best decade by far for television.
Really? That's a bold statement.
Yeah.
I mean, we're doing good right now. We're doing really good right now. I think we're approaching that. I don't know.
We're in the golden age of television.
The television singularity. The television singularity is upon us.
There's so much garbage real life type crap nowadays that I think the 80s was superior in that regard.
I will say that it was the golden age of sitcoms.
Oh, okay.
Sitcoms.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, of course. I mean, that's the whole topic.
It had to be the golden age. They even gave us the Golden Girls. I mean, therefore, it was the golden age.
See, the Golden Girls, man, they just raises up the level to about a 9 alone.
So why do you think, Goldsmith, I'm going to jump to you, why do you think 80s sitcoms were so prevalent? God damn! Prevalent in the 80s.
Yeah.
Why do you think sitcoms were the mainstays? Why were sitcoms the show? Because every channel, even Fox came about in the 80s, their most popular show was a family sitcom.
Well, I think it's because they became so popular. I mean, they've had them like since like the 50s and maybe the 40s. They've had sitcoms. I mean, like the 50s.
Yeah,
like
the
Lucy
sitcom's
and stuff
always
like
been
that.
a part of television,
The
but
60s,
80s,
but
it was...
I think specifically because of the Cold War and stuff like this gave a really good escape, like Jeremie said. And by the 80s, you know, they had almost perfected, you know, the formula for a sitcom. And I think it started to peak or started to hit that peak in the late 70s with Three's Company and Taxi. Taxi's one of the all-time greats. I'm going to include that in the 70s and 80s.
And MASH.
And MASH. But not After MASH. That was in the 80s. That was
not After MASH.
that was a goof.
Robbie, why do you think sitcoms were so prevalent, so big in the 80s, and why sitcoms really became the heart of TV?
Poor taste.
A lot of drug use.
I really think that a lot of people still bought into that whole "this is the American family." I also think that I think that television was still hadn't really grown out and matured yet, if that makes sense. Like television was still very much under the thumb of what they thought morality was for the typical American, you know, and it was like the mom and the dad, and there was some groundbreaking stuff in the 80s. And there's a lot of that family sitcom stuff in the 80s, absolutely. But one of the biggest shows of the 80s was Cheers, which is about a bunch of delinquents that hang out at a bar all day long. Yeah. So there's enough subversion. The 80s started getting subversion. Does that make sense? And I don't know, it was still that American dream, that typical whatever you think and dumbing down of America. But they started evolving a little bit further, if that makes sense.
It moved from the American dream to Americana.
Yeah, a little bit actually, yeah. and shows like Cheers, and in particular, you know, but I just think television was still growing up. I think the 80s was its adolescence, and a lot of people look back on their adolescent years as great years. But I think that people loved sitcoms back then though, because they were easily digestible. It was good escapism, like these guys have just said. But a lot of people just still bought into that American dream, and it was subversive enough with its comedy at times that it was relevant to the growing consciousness of the people in America at that time.
Yeah.
Well, shit.
Dang.
That's exactly what I was going to say. No, yeah, I agree with you there. It was easily packaged, and again, even Fox, who was a new network at the time, and people put Fox and NBC
they blew up with
there.
Married with Children.
Yeah, Married with Children,
which was a very subversive
exactly
idea on that typical American
But it
family.
took the traditional and went a different direction with it, but and again, we associate with Fox with being one of the big networks, but not at the time. 20th Century Fox did not have their own network at the time. So talking about sitcoms, there's got to be some that stand out in your mind or something that you really enjoy. So I'm going to start with Jeremie. What are some sitcoms from that era that you love?
Well, Golden Girls. Most definitely. Golden Girls.
Talk about great theme songs.
Thank you
People
for being
can't
a friend.
see you because this is a radio show, but Jeremie, doppelganger for Betty White. They can't tell that. It's from his deep voice.
I dress up as her often. Don't worry. And I don't know if you ever heard it. Do you remember Out of This World? Out of This World was a really good show.
I don't know if I remember that, man.
Man, nobody I ever talked to seems to remember this show. Okay, so It was a great show. It was about this girl that was half alien, half human, was living as like just a teenager.
I think I saw this on a list today when I was looking up 80 shows.
Dude, I used to want her power to freeze time constantly when I was younger.
It was a
great power.
It was a sitcom though.
It was
right?
it was a sitcom.
I think I remember it, but I get it confused with It's a Small Wonder. Those two I get flip flopped because they're both a young girl and one's a robot and the other one's an alien. And they lived with a family.
I hear a lot of people say that it is kind of a similar concept, I guess. But no, I love Out of This World is amazing. And Alf. Awesome show.
Oh, yeah. Alf,
it was a good show.
In the marketing of Alf, remember the toys and the figures?
There was a lot of Alf toys.
Cartoon.
Burger King, yeah, so many promotions.
Comic book.
But
and how many cats were eating that era?
Yeah, see, that's the one thing about Alf I cannot forgive, though. Why does he eat cats?
It was
Alf.
like a delicacy.
Because that's what they
him.
do on Milmac, man.
Alf, please. Stop eating our cats.
And
This
again,
is not what we
that's
do
what
on Earth.
They do that well at most Chinese buffets, yes.
Oh, really? That's
That's
the
a low
easiest
blow.
joke to go to. when
That's
you're
such a
talking
low
about
blow.
cats.
Well, if we're talking about sitcoms, you got to go to the easy joke. And talk about easy jokes. Goldsmith.
Oh.
I got a lot of them.
Snap.
What do you? Okay, let's hear some of your favorite sitcoms or ones that stand out in your mind.
I mean, we pretty much talked about all of them, and there's going to be some of my top 5. So I'm instead going to use my time in this segment to talk about forgotten TV shows from the 80s.
Ooh.
There's this
I'll allow it.
there's this show with
We'll
Tim.
just edit this whole part out, so it doesn't matter.
I was looking at this list earlier today, and it was so interesting because there's these shows that I've never heard of. Have you guys ever heard of Automan?
Yeah, the guy that turned into a car.
Yeah, Desi.
Yes.
It was
It
Desi Arnaz
was from the
Jr.
producers of Tron.
Tron, yeah. And it was Desi Arnaz Jr. who was the main guy.
There was a show with Josh Brolin.
Yeah,
From
Josh.
back then?
That was it's on this list. Yeah, there was. It's a long list. There was a show called The Last Precinct with Adam West and Ernie Hudson.
Whoa, no way.
Right? There was a show with Scott Bakula and Gary Watanabe, the Asian guy from 16 Candles.
Yeah.
Called Gung Ho.
Yeah, it was based on the movie, wasn't it?
The movie Gung Ho.
Yeah.
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 Which I've never seen, but
The
I
Michael
thought that
Keaton classic.
Yeah.
One of
Wait.
John's favorite films.
Yeah, it's actually I do love that film. It's a
Wow.
great film.
I've
Well, there was
never even
It's no
seen
Johnny
this.
Dangerously,
It's a
but
great film. Have you not seen it?
No, I didn't
Oh,
even.
you should watch don't watch the crappy show.
it's about the dude
Watch
that
the
works
great
at
movie.
he goes to work at the Asian factory or whatever, right?
Yeah, they get
Car
Yeah.
Factory.
It gets bought
Yeah.
out by an Asian car company, and they're trying to keep the employees because they're trying to prove they can produce as many cars as their Asian
I
counterparts.
almost want to say that the dude that's
Yeah.
in the series is in the movie, but I'm not sure about that.
We
you
watched
might
the
be
trailer.
you might be racist.
we watched the trailer for that show, and it looked
Yeah.
a little bit racist. I'm not gonna lie.
It starts off with that.
It was the 80s.
Yeah, it looked,
Yes.
I like 80s television, but that was a little dark.
And that show with Josh Brolin you were talking about was Private Eye.
Yes, and he's like the bad cop.
Yeah. he's wearing a leather jacket.
He's like totally
He's
greaser.
bad. Yeah.
There's a leather jacket.
So was Gung Ho like Lost in Translation before Lost in Translation? Then
Yeah, in a dream.
And also, the last one I'm going to talk about, there's this show with Jeff Conaway, the guy from Grease, who played Nicky.
Is that the dude with
from
the scarred up face?
No, the second main guy in Grease,
I don't
Jeff
know.
Conaway.
Are you talking about the villain? Like,
No, John Travolta's buddy, the blonde-haired guy.
We'll just agree with
Oh.
you and move on
Yeah.
from there.
He was
Again,
in a
all this is
show-
being cut out.
He was in a show called Wizards and Warriors.
What?
Check out this poster.
Yeah, I saw that when I was looking things up today, but I didn't actually see anything from the show.
I know,
Just
right?
that, yeah.
That's a D&D campaign right there.
Yeah.
I'll try to remember right now to throw up that image, but it looks like a show we would all watch today.
Yeah.
I would watch it.
Robbie, are there any shows that stand out to you that you love from the 80s? Sitcoms
Well,
in particular.
you guys, Jeremie talked about Golden Girls. Golden Girls is great, and I did not appreciate Golden Girls back when it first aired or during its initial rerun phase throughout the 90s because I just didn't appreciate it, but I watch it now. I actually watch it on the Hallmark Channel, and I love it. It's so good. Like, seriously, Sophia is like, no, whatever.
What was her name? Estelle Getty?
Estelle Getty, yeah. I also love Charles in Charge. I really liked that show. I loved Perfect Strangers when I was a kid, and I really, really liked Mama's Family.
Yeah.
Like, I really liked Mama's
Year did
Family.
that come out?
I don't remember the exact year, but it was like
80.
86, 87,
Yeah.
something like that. I loved Mama's Family for some reason. I absolutely love those ones.
I vaguely remember it.
Yeah. Oh, I loved
That
it.
was
Vicki Lawrence played the grandmother, and like,
Yeah.
I just love it. I love that show so much. And it has a lot in common with Charles in Charge in that there's a different cast in the first season, And then they changed it up for the rest of the show run, which is interesting. Because if you remember, Charles in Charge had a different family the first season. Do you guys remember that at all? No?
I didn't watch a lot of Charles in Charge.
Well, I did, and I loved it. So, what about you, John? You got any?
So the two that stand out in my mind were, we already talked about Elf, and we already talked about It's a Small Wonder, which is, for some reason, the show nobody ever remembers with the robot girl. But one that I really liked that kicked off Carlton Banks' career.
Silver Spoons.
Silver Spoons.
Yeah.
I loved
With
Silver
little Ricky
Spoons.
Schroeder,
Yeah,
right?
little Ricky Schroeder. So I love Silver Spoons and just hit like, I mean, it was pretty much like Richie Rich, right? But a sitcom. And so I love Silver Spoons. That was one of my favorites. That didn't make my top 5, so we'll get to that in a little bit. But there was a lot of great sitcoms. I mean, if you actually sit and look back through it, I think a lot of people forget they either misplaced them in the 70s or 90s. There's just so many great sitcoms. It's hard to get them all under the belt there. There's just so much. So that brings us to favorite characters or supporting characters. So let's talk about some of your favorite characters. And it doesn't have to be the actor per se, but the character they portray. Like we said, John Larroquette was hilarious in Night Court. He's not a real womanizer in real life. I hope not. But he didn't like that role, but it was a role that was a funny role for him. So what are some of these characters that stand out in your mind that you really enjoy? I'm going to start with Jeremie.
Definitely Geordie LaForge.
Noise.
Supporting character. And LeVar Burton, awesome, of course. So that's probably my favorite, so much that I'm trying to think of another one that I really would like. But I really think LeVar Burton's probably, he's top supporting character.
So who's one of your favorite lead characters, main characters from the 80s that stand out in your mind?
Roseanne. Definitely.
Oh, yeah.
Roseanne.
That's a great one.
Roseanne, so much attitude. Her and John Goodman's just their interactions on set and in the show are so
Roseanne
great.
and Dan, right?
Roseanne and Dan.
Yeah.
I never even thought about how they kind of pseudo-rhyme like that. I wonder if that was on purpose. But yeah, Roseanne and definitely Patrick Stewart. I'm just going to go back there.
Captain
James.
Yeah.
Yep. Captain
Picard's
Jean-Luc
dope,
Picard.
man.
Captain Jean-Luc Picard, definitely.
Goldsmith, any characters that stand out in your mind?
Mine's short and simple, and excluding everything from Star Trek. Probably my favorite on-screen duo of all time is Dr. Sam Beckett and Admiral Al Calavici from Quantum Leap. They work so well together as like the straight-laced, brilliant scientist, physicist, and Al Calavici, the womanizing guy with the gruff voice, and he walks around with the crazy clothes and the cigar all the time, and he's banging his hand link, which was a precursor to a tablet. Talking to Ziggy, the computer. Best on-screen duo of all time, probably.
Why haven't I leaped yet? Robbie, characters that stand out, lead.
I really like Crockett and Tubbs from Miami Vice.
Oh, yeah.
When I was a kid, I thought they were super cool. Alf is a great main character. And when I was a kid, and I wouldn't really pick this one today, but when I was a kid, I really, really was enamored and had a big man crush on Sam Malone.
I'm glad you brought up.
And I hate the Boston Red Sox.
Oh.
And
it's a package deal. It's a
package
package deal.
One of my favorite things maybe about Cheers, being a Yankees fan, was the constant misery of the Red Sox fans that they would go over on that show, always, and it was great. But anyway, I like the idea that he's a former major league pitcher and he runs this bar, and I love all that. I also love Carla from Cheers, though. She's one of my favorite supporting characters. Yeah. Rhea Perlman, she is so funny, and B.A. from the A-Team. Come on, Mr. T, come on, man.
I thought Mr. T was the coolest, and I wanted gold chains because of him. Just for the
Pity the
record.
fool.
So you mentioned a lot. I talk.
When Mr. T says "I pity the fool," he's talking about you, John.
Oh,
you've already mentioned most of them. We talked about Elf already, who was a character in him of himself. I mean, he was this great, like, funny character and huge part of the '80s, especially kids. I mean, everybody loved him, and they had the toys and the action figures and the cartoon spin-off and the Burger King pack-in, etc. And you talked about Cousin Belky, great character. His Bronson Pinchot's character of that, the doofy, and he had all these crazy stories about sheep and stuff, almost like Betty White's character. And then Macgyver, the character of Macgyver.
Yeah.
And I thought he thought he was so cool, and I actually got my haircut like him.
You had the Macgyver mullet?
I had the Macgyver haircut. And my mom was like, "It looks great. You should keep it." And so I had the MacGyver haircut probably until probably till high school.
Till like 2012.
Like 6 months ago, wasn't it?
Till recently. So, and then of course, the characters from Magnum P.I. as well. So there's some great actors who've put themselves in these characters, and you buy them in these characters, but like you said, or maybe I said it, you can get typecast in that role if it's a popular series, unfortunately. But some great characters.
Top 5 favorite 80s live-action television shows coming up right after the break here on Pop Culture Philosophers. Hey everybody, it's Rockin' Robbie here. I am thrilled to announce another all-new episode of Rockin' with Rockin' Robbie is about to hit exclusive to YouTube. This time we're talking about lies and fish. It's going to be super, super fun. I am there, Hammertime, Holshoe, Justified Justin, and Jumpin' and Jivin' James discussing lies and fish. A nice mixture of subjects including Charlie the Tuna and President Nixon. Of course, you hear both of those subjects in the same podcast when you're talking about lies and fish. That's Rockin' with Rockin' Robbie, exclusive only to the Pop Culture Philosophers YouTube channel. Hey everybody, welcome back to Pop Culture Philosophers. We are talking about 80s television. We have a great show tonight. We have Jeremie with us.
Hey, what's up?
Of course, John Hammertime Holshoe.
Yep.
And of course, Justin Goldsmith.
Hey.
And we're about to get to our top 5 favorite live-action 80s television series. But first, I want to give a shout-out to Kevin Stokes. Kevin Stokes is an amazing comic book artist here based in Huntsville. He's a great guy. I love him. He's a good friend of mine. Kevin says his favorite TV show of the 80s is Alf. Loves Alf, has always loved Alf. It was the first thing that popped in. Hates cats. No, Kevin loves cats. I'm just telling you that absolutely. Anyway, that was Kevin's favorite. Please let us know in the comments, what is your favorite 80s live-action television series? Because we're about to get to our top 5 right now.
That's right, the meat of the show, if you will. The shepherd's pie of the show, which has meat in it. Our top 5. So we're going to go round robin, start with number 5. Jeremie, give me your top 5.
My top 5.
Well, let's start with your number 5.
My number 5. You got me all messed up at the beginning. It's Fraggle Rock. Fraggle Rock number 5. Oh. Down in Fraggle Rock.
Speaking of theme songs.
Yeah. We forgot it.
Dance your cares away. We're reached for another day. Chase the blues away.
Down in Fraggle Rock.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my number 5. I said it earlier, but my mom let me, when I was younger, I was sick. She let me just sit in her room and just stay there while she was at work. Nobody's home, and I'm just watching Fraggle Rock.
That was a Jim Henson production,
and
correct?
it's HBO, so that was some privilege.
Dude, man.
Yeah. Talk about silver spoons, you asshole.
Don't hate.
No, Fraggle Rock was great, dude.
Great choice.
It is.
Your number 5, Goldsmith.
I almost put Fraggle Rock at my number 5. I'm glad I didn't now. My number 5 is Family Ties.
Okay, nice.
I love Alex P. Keaton, and their whole family dynamic. It's just, they had some really funny stuff, and the real stuff that they had in that show was really real.
It was.
Like the episode where his dad has a heart attack.
Yeah.
That's like, when they're in the hospital room, that's like one of the best sitcom TV moments of all time.
Robbie, you're number 5.
First of all, honorable mention.
God damn it.
Honorable mention to Unsolved Mysteries.
Oh, that scared the shit out of me.
Yeah, it started in like 87 or something, but Robert Stack's voice still scares me today.
But
I can't watch
that's
the
not shit you need to learn before you go to bed.
I know, right?
So-and-so murdered, and we're still looking for him, and he's in your neighborhood, but we don't know where.
And in 1988, my bedtime was like 10 o'clock, so I watched Unsolved Mysteries right before bed. But my number 5 is 1986. It debuted Alf. Alien Life Form. I loved it when I was a kid, and the reason why I love the Bob Seger song, Old Time Rock and Roll, is because of Alf.
Yes.
And I love that series. I loved it. He's from Milmac. He eats cats. I get it. I love cats. I have 3 cats.
They're delicious.
And they're delicious. No, but I love Alf. I think it's super fun. And I don't even know if something like that would work anymore, but Alf was great.
Alf was huge. Great show. My number 5 is actually going to be Who's the Boss?
Ooh, nice.
So I love Tony Danza still to this day. And then Loveless Milano, and it was just a fun show.
And what was the grandmother in that show? Mona. She's a great character.
Mona, who later was on the coach when the coach show
She
becomes
was on Coach, and she was
when
on.
they become a big.
She was on Soap as well.
She was in. She's been in a lot of stuff, and she's done a lot
she's
of
a
things.
great comedic
films.
actor.
Yeah, she's great. She was in Time Bandits.
Oh,
I'll
good
ask
movie.
you real quick. Who's the boss?
It's actually I forget her name.
Angela.
now. Angela.
It's Angela,
Yeah,
yeah.
it really is Angela.
Do you remember the
I mean,
episode of
she's-
Community where like Abed like definitively proves that it's Angela to the professor?
I forget about that.
But a great show, and again, that's not where Tony Danza got his start, but probably he's one of his most memorable roles.
Well, Taxi's where
yeah,
you got
yeah, exactly. But I'd say that it pretty much was his show, despite the fact he was not the boss. But a great show. So I'd like to know your number 4, Jeremie.
My number 4 is Married with Children.
And Mary.
Nice.
And the first that and The Simpsons made Fox a real network. Those two successful
It
shows.
kicked off that network so
Yeah.
well.
Married with
Yeah.
Children was a big deal.
What year did Married with Children start? You know,
80.
It's like 87,
88, I think.
something like
88.
that.
Okay.
I think
I
it's
would have
88.
talked about that more. That's another one that I thought was a '90s show for
No,
me.
what? No,
Yeah.
it's an 80s show.
89 or 90.
I mean, late 80s, but 80s enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mentioned how, man, brain fart. But yeah, it's a great show. Great show.
Yeah, it launched Christina Applegate's career. She's probably her and Katie. Is it Siegel?
Siegel.
I think it's Siegel.
I don't know.
And Al Bundy, which his real name is
Ed O'Neill.
Ed O'Neill.
Yeah.
Ed O'Neill.
They both
O'Neill.
have had great careers since then. Very successful, all of them. Very
Ed O'Neill's
successful.
in what is it? Modern Family.
Yeah, Modern Family.
Still got
All
work.
I'm surprised because how old is he now?
Very.
70,
But he's still
something.
acting, and again, they've all had really great careers.
I love him in
Yes.
Dutch and the Wayne's World
Dutch
movie. Just
is-
gonna say.
Dutch is
Oh.
amazing.
Married with Children went from 87 to 97, 10 years.
Jeez, that's actually really good.
That's why I always associate with a '90s show. I didn't start watching it because, like I said, before I moved, we didn't have cable. I don't remember Fox on the old satellite there. We might not.
Fox
have had
was a big
Wow.
deal, man.
Or you know what I think it was is my parents wouldn't let me watch it.
Yeah, that's probably it.
Yeah, I really think
It
that
was
the
really
case.
looked down upon at my church. I'll
Yeah.
tell you that.
Huh.
And I loved it.
I thank my mom for being very liberal with the television when I was younger.
I said Roseanne was very real to life, so was Married with Children.
What was your number 4, Justin Goldsmith?
My number 4 is the A-Team.
Dun,
Bum,
dun,
dun,
dun.
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 Bum, bum, bum.
Yeah.
I always want to. I still want a van like that. We should get one, dude, for the
And
show.
it's just a black van.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
just a black van. It was like
But
a Chevy Astran.
the rear tires are lifted, and it's got that badass spoiler.
That is true.
And the stripe, you cannot forget the stripe.
And this right.
That stripe is important.
I had that. I had a toy version of that van that I played with. I didn't have any figures from the show, so like He-Man
I had
and G.I.
figures from
Joes
the
and stuff.
A-Team, or from the Mr. T cartoon. I had figures from that. I remember that.
And this-
But there were 18 figures. I remember that.
Mr.
yeah.
T in general was a big part of the 80s.
when did the
huge.
cereal
He was
come
in the
out?
The
WWF.
cereal,
80s.
the cereal's the late 80s, and it's like a cheap generic version of Captain Crunch, and I loved it.
Macgyver almost made my list, but I have them in the same category with the A-Team, but I like the A-Team more because it's more of a team
Yeah.
thing. I love it when a plan comes together.
A-Team came very, very close, but Unsolved Mysteries
Hmm.
got the honorable mention.
So what would your so A-Team's not on your is your number 4? What is your number 4, Robbie?
My number 4 is not A-Team. It is 1984's Michael Mann classic Miami Vice.
Miami Vice.
I cannot tell you how cool I thought that show was when I was a kid. I love the music. I love the style. I love Michael Mann. He did Manhunter. He did The Insider. He did Heat. He was one of my favorite directors. He did the Miami Vice movie, actually.
Yeah, he did.
Based on the show that he created, and I really liked the movie. I love
Things
those characters.
come around.
It's mostly, you guys know, if you listen to this show, how much I love music in cinema or television. And Miami Vice, the music alone puts it at number 4 for me. Fantastic.
That was the show that put Ferrari on the map.
Really?
That's not the
Okay.
case. That's
It
not
put-
the case at
It
all.
put Don Johnson on the map.
It did, actually, in White Blazers. My number 4 is actually going to be, we talked a little bit about this character, about Cousin Balky. So it's Perfect Strangers.
Yeah.
When it comes to the Friday night shows, TGIF, you had Full House, you had Step by Step, you had Family Matters.
Yeah,
But
Boy
my-
Meets World, but
Boy
Perfect
Meets World.
Strangers and
Perfect
Mr.
Strangers
Belvedere
was-
were the two
yeah.
big hits when
Perfect
it first
Strangers
started.
was my favorite of the TGIF by far.
I agree.
You know,
I
up
love
until
that show.
probably Hanging with Mr. Hooper.
It really almost made my
Yes.
top 5. If you, John, look, I'm not even kidding. Look at my top 5. See how I marked out Perfect Strangers? Yeah, it was on there until
Love
right
Perfect
before the
Strangers.
show.
Again, Bronson Pinchot, and they lived in an apartment, and they just got in the goofiest situations.
Yeah.
And they had the neighbors that they both were dating or
Yeah,
whatever.
they were both dating the same. Yeah,
And I go back and watch it now, and there's
And it's-
no way that
Family Matters is a spin-off of Perfect Strangers because Harriet
Yeah.
was the elevator operator.
Yeah.
Oh man,
Hey,
I never even
what-
thought about that.
What was the tag game that they? Boochie, boochie, boochie.
And then they had the happy dance. And Balky called him Cousin Larry. Like, everything about that show cracked me out.
Yeah.
Seriously, until I was listening to the music from Miami Vice, it was on my top 5.
Let's move on to number 3. Jeremy, you're number 3.
Full House.
All right, I can dig it.
Everywhere you look.
There you are.
But a great cast though. Bob Saget. I love me some Bob Saget.
I thought that cousin Joe or Uncle Joey was
Uncle
like
Joe-
the coolest person in the world.
Oh, man.
Cut it
Dave
out. I'm like,
Coulier?
yeah, I thought he was so
Cut it out.
hilarious. I'm like, that's who I want to be when I grow up.
Do you remember the Nickelodeon show, What Would You Do? Oh, yeah. Dave Coulier did that.
it's made out of wood.
What about Dreamy? Because that's the word of the day. What about Dreamy John Stamos, right?
Dude, John
Dude, he
Stamos.
still
He
looks
still looks the
fantastic.
He
same.
does.
He
He's still
moisturizes.
really
does.
good
He
looking.
looks
If
almost
Iron
exactly
Man
the
was a
same
made for
still.
TV movie, John Stamos.
But yes, the Full House. Full House.
Justin, what would be your number 3?
Well, you're talking about great casts with the Full House. I don't think there's a much better show on TV that had a better cast than Taxi.
Taxi had a great cast. Didn't that start in the 70s?
It started in
and
the
trickle into
70s,
Yeah.
but as I said earlier,
Andy
I'm going to...
Kaufman.
Andy
Oh,
Christopher
Kaufman,
Lloyd.
Tony
Christopher
Danza,
Lloyd.
Christopher
Christopher
Lloyd,
Danny
Danny
DeVito.
DeVito.
What's her name?
Tony
She's
Danza.
in Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt right now. Oh my goodness.
I can't...
She played Andy
Elaine-
Kaufman's.
yeah.
It's a toaster. She was on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember. And she was in Scrooged?
Yeah, that's what I just
Yeah.
said. It's a toaster.
Yeah.
That was my reference.
Oh, yeah,
Damn.
yeah.
Yeah.
And somebody else. Judd Hirsch.
Oh, I love John Hirsch.
That show was just phenomenal. Like, it's one of my favorite shows in general.
Yeah,
from the
it is.
past.
It is a great cast. It is such a great cast.
Yeah.
Danny DeVito still somehow looks the same as he did in Taxi now.
Yeah.
How does Danny DeVito not age?
I don't know. It's like he just got old and stayed old and just never got older.
Carol Kane. That's
Carol
her name.
Kane.
Yeah.
She's amazing.
She is awesome. Robbie, you're number 3.
My number 3 is Where Everybody Knows Your Name. Cheers, man. I love Cheers. It's actually
That was a different take on the song. Where everybody knows.
a lot of
Weird.
a lot of 80s shows I remember from my childhood. I remember Cheers from my childhood, but I have rewatched Cheers many times in my recent
It holds
life,
up well.
and I love it. And
Yeah,
I
it's
think
a
it's a
great
great
show.
show. I love the entire cast of characters. It's probably, in my opinion, very Taxi-like, a great ensemble cast.
Yeah.
Like, everybody in that show is perfect. It made Cliff Clavin, what's his name?
Oh, my God.
John Rath.
Ratzenberger.
He was
Yeah.
in Star Wars before
It made
that.
him
That's what he's
a
known
household
for.
name. It made him a household name for like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he was the
The
Pitney
post
Postal
office.
guy.
It was a
He's
good
also
image for the
he's
post
also in
office.
House 2. But Cheers, I love it. Like I said, I loved Sam Malone when I was a kid. I hate the Boston Red Sox, guys. I don't want people thinking that because I like Cheers, I like the Red Sox. It's not the case.
You're going to piss off our Boston listeners. All 2 of them.
I don't care. Fuck Boston.
Cheers is a great show.
The team or the...
Fuck the whole city.
Oh.
I'm just kidding, guys.
Speaking of Sammy Adams, my number 3, I don't have a segue for this. My number 3 is a show that actually come on right after Cheers, and that was Night Court.
Great show.
I love Night Court. I talked about it earlier. Harry Stone, Judge Harry Stone, played by Harry Anderson, and John Larroquette, and Bull, and Marky Post's character, Christine. Just a great, great show. The weird thing about the show is that they had almost like a season finale where it ends the way you want it to end, and NBC's like, you know what? We ain't canceling the show. So they spent the last season trying to fix everything, put everything back, and then they got fucking canceled. But NBC wouldn't let them like wrap things up because Warner Brothers at the time wanted to take the show into syndication. They're like, no, wrap everything up because we need to be able to go to the next season if we decide to. Of course, they never did. I mean, the whole thing doesn't end appropriately unless you look at the second to last season where it does end appropriately, but then they got to fix that. They literally spent 3 episodes in the following season trying to put everything back because they put everything in a perfect bow. But it's just a great show. I love the theme like we talked about, and it's so funny and so what an odd concept about a court at night, like a municipal court at night, and hilarious show. But a great premise apparently for a show. So your number 2 as we're getting close to the number one, I'm excited to hear everybody's number one. Your number two, Jeremie.
So, my number two is Star Trek, TNG. I mean, I'm not Justin, so, it's not the best thing on earth, but it is very, I guess, revolutionary for the time because it explored a lot of themes and concepts that weren't being explored on television. I mean, the first Star Trek did, of course, but I think Star Trek TNG took it to the next level. And we got a lot of really cool story arcs. There's even like crossovers into other, I guess, medias. Q shows up in DC at one point. TNG, one of the better sci-fi shows from that area. I mean, I guess there was V, but I didn't really watch V.
Yeah, V doesn't hold up as well but TNG does.
Even with Freddy Krueger, it doesn't hold up.
but yeah, so, and I mean, of course, all the actors, such a good cast of actors. A lot of people got their starts there or made it bigger there. Yep. Star Trek.
Justin, you're number two.
I put a lot of thought into my top 5 list for this podcast. And
No, I wasn't asking your number two. I'm telling you, you're like a shit.
Oh,
you're a number two to me.
dare you?
Wow.
I put a lot of thought into these top 5s for this podcast, and I'm not lying when I tell you.
Are you saying you don't put thought into the other
Yeah,
top fives?
you fucker.
No, I mean for this podcast.
Every
for
time else he
the
phones
PCP
it in.
For the PCP show.
Okay.
So I'm not lying when I tell you this is one of the most difficult decisions I've ever had to make on this show.
You put Star Trek at number 2.
My number 2 is Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Goodness.
Holy shit.
Wow.
Holy shit.
My mind is done.
I think I know what his number 1 is.
Don't say anything about it. We just talked about Star Trek, so let's move on.
Robbie, I'm curious to know your number 2.
Damn, I don't feel very original anymore at Star Trek Next Generation.
Oh, well.
I'm serious. I was going to do this big lead and I was going to be like, these are the voyages. I was going to do a Patrick Stewart impersonation and everything. No, it's Star Trek. I love that show. It's great. It like all the stuff we were talking about in the 80s, a lot of it's dumbed down. As much as we love it, it's like lowest common denominator entertainment. Star Trek, like you said, went the next level. In fact, it went the next generation.
Oh.
This is so good. I love it. Number 2.
My number 2 also start. No, it's not. Can you?
That would have been amazing.
That would have been.
I do like Star Trek.
John, you're kicked out.
Yeah, not on my. It is a great show.
Get
though.
the fuck
I don't
outta
know
here, man.
How
You're
it didn't
not
make it in my top 5. It is a good show. My number 2. Again, it's because of the cast and one person in particular.
Star Trek Next Generation.
Family Ties.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I was such a.
I love how we were all very forgiving when you said family ties.
I really loved Michael J.
Acceptable.
Fox's character and Justine Bateman's character on the show.
Yeah.
Her and Michael Fox.
Jason Bateman's
Michael J. Fox is so
sister,
great too. And a lot of that had to do with, I think, a lot of the overlap with Back to the Future, and I was a big fan of Back to the Future. But I seriously still love Michael J. Fox. He was so great on the show. And the show overall, you're right, it had some great episodes and some great, I think it was Goldsmith talking about the heart attack episode.
Yeah.
There's some like episodes that really hit you in the feels. There's some hilarious episodes. It's just a great show, and it holds up pretty well. There's definitely stuff that's like really 80s. Really 80s. But I think the show holds up phenomenally well.
And it's funny. I started watching that show because of Michael Gross. Because I actually saw Tremors before I saw Family Ties.
Now we see
That's funny.
He's the guy,
He's
the
the
gun
dad,
guy.
right?
He's their dad. And he's the gun guy in Tremors.
Yeah, he's the gun guy in Tremors. That's what I meant. He's not he's the gun guy in. So now we're gonna get to the number 1, which I'm excited to hear that. I'm mostly Goldsmiths because I was really surprised with the Star Trek thing, but I think I have an idea what it is. So number 1,
You have no clue what my number 1 is, though.
I'm going to do a rundown here before we get to that. So Jeremie, before we hear your number 1, your number 5 was Fraggle Rock. Your number 4 was Married with Children. Your number 3 was Full House. Your number 2 was Star Trek TNG. Almost the same amount of syllables. I don't know why I didn't say it out. And explaining this is more syllables. Anyway, your number 1. I'm excited to hear what your number 1 all-time favorite 80s TV show is.
Man, I hope this doesn't sound weak, but Roseanne. I love Roseanne.
Okay.
That is a weak-ass answer.
No.
The best Halloween episodes in a sitcom period.
They
they have some really
they
good
had some
ones.
great episodes.
But Roseanne, definitely. John Goodman, Roseanne, of course. But yeah, like I said earlier, their interactions, like they play off of each other so well in those roles that it's very entertaining to watch. Like, and I can watch Roseanne pretty much anytime. Just put on Roseanne. I'll sit there and I'll watch it. Yeah. But yeah, Roseanne.
So I'm excited to hear number 1. Justin, I'm going to go over this real quick here. Your number 5 was Family Ties. Your number 4 was The A-Team. Number 3 was Taxi. Your number 2 was Star Trek: The Next Generation. What is your number 1?
Robbie's nodding at me in approval. I think he guessed.
Is it Schmeinem Schmeep? Does it rhyme with that?
It's one of the finest examples.
If we ever do a podcast about Scott Bakula, I guess Justin's hosting it.
It's one of the finest examples of science fiction ever to grace the small screen. Quantum Leap has been, and always will be one of my favorite shows.
We did establish, though, earlier in the show that Robbie doesn't know the difference between Scott Bakula and the guy from Charles in Charge.
Scott Bakula.
Chachi.
Originally, Scott Bakula was
I thought
supposed
he
to
was
be
a
on
vampire.
Quantum Leap.
Was he really?
No. I made that
Okay, I
up.
was like, I don't believe in those facts. Those alternative facts.
That show. There has never been a show up till then, and there still hasn't been a show. Actually, Timeless is similar, or not Timeless. The one on Netflix that you were telling me about.
Oh,
Travelers.
Oh, so good.
It's a similar concept, but Sam Beckett is heading this project to time travel, and they're going to Congress is going to cut his funding, so he steps into the machine without testing it, and just his consciousness swaps with somebody in the past in his own lifetime. It's just so it created its own rules for what's going on, and you have to figure out why he keeps leaping to different people.
And what his mission is when he does leap into that person.
And and the on-screen interaction with, like I said earlier, Sam and Al are probably my favorite on-screen duo of all time. And there's so many good episodes of that show.
Robbie, your number 5 was Elf. Your number 4 was Miami Vice. Your number 3 was Cheers. Your number 2 was Star Trek: The Next Generation. Just like
original
everyone else's
number two.
Yeah. I'm dying to know your number 1 because you said it would shock and surprise us.
No, I said that nobody would think of it.
Oh, maybe that was it.
1980, Cosmos, A Personal Journey by Carl Sagan.
Oh, yeah. Don't they have a new one with
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yeah.
The original Cosmos, though, by Carl Sagan, I still watch today. I love it. It was on PBS. It's an educational thing. It's about astronomy. It's about science. Carl Sagan is one of my absolute number 1 idols. Like, period.
You have a Carl Sagan poster above your bed.
I used to be I'm a musician, and I was a lyricist. I was a rapper, and my stage name is Contact, which is a Carl Sagan novel. Well, they did the movie, if you remember, with Jodie Foster and Matthew McConaughey. But Cosmos, to me, is still my favorite show from the 80s. I love it. I watch it today. I adore that show. I think it's important, and if you've never seen it, some of the information is a little outdated. It was updated in the 90s, but the new one with Neil deGrasse Tyson really sends a lot of a tribute to the Carl Sagan show. But Carl Sagan is one of the most important figures in American history, in my opinion. And Cosmos is my favorite TV show of the 80s period.
I agree, and that's a great choice.
I'm
I'm glad that we actually didn't talk about it in the entire show until now.
So we'll get to my number 1 real quick. My number 5 was Who's the Boss. My number 4 is Perfect Strangers. My number 3 was Night Court. My number 2 is Family Ties. My favorite one of all time, my favorite show from the 80s, is actually going to be Cheers. We've talked about Cheers already. Great cast. It's one of those shows that actually holds up incredibly well. Great theme.
And a great last episode.
Great last episode. And just a great
good drama.
What a cast, man.
Yeah.
What a cast. It holds up really well. And it just makes me wonder why there aren't more bars and basements. I think everybody had a great top 5. There's a lot of great shows. Go back and watch some of these shows. Some hold up incredibly well. Some are fucking terrible. Some of you don't realize how bad they are. But Cheers is great. Star Trek is great. Quantum Leap is great.
Available to stream for free on NBC.com.
Cosmos is great.
Yeah. Cosmos is great. Again, go ahead and watch this stuff. Pluto is not a planet anymore, but otherwise I think it holds up really well. We appreciate everybody for listening. 80s TV. Next episode, John, we're talking about a director. We are talking about a director. I believe we're going to talk about Steven Spielberg's cousin.
Steven Spielberg.
or we're talking about the great Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah, it's going to be Quentin Tarantino. We're going to have Jason from RCR Reviews here with us. I'm really looking forward to that episode. It's going to be great, right, John?
It's going to be... I'm excited. It's yeah. I think it's going to be a good show, and I think people should tune in. I don't want to miss that. Tune in, download, subscribe.
Be sure to point your satellite dish in the right direction.
Yeah, right. But before that, we got a new Rockin' with Rockin' Robbie coming up on YouTube, Lies and Fish.
Lies and Fish.
Lies
I wonder what that
fish.
could be about.
I don't know. I think it's going to be about lies and fish.
Oh, it's very self-explanatory.
No joke, guys. You don't have to figure it out. It is literally about lies and fish. So it's going to be super fun. I'm very excited.
We appreciate everybody tuning in, checking us out. Join us next time on the same 80s channel, the same 80s time. I don't even know. I have nothing.
Vice.
I do appreciate everybody tuning in. If you're checking us out on the website, you can get RSS feeds either Android or via iTunes. We also have a YouTube channel. Check that out. If you're subscribing or on YouTube, check us out at our website, which is www.popculturephilosophers.com.
And we're going to leave you guys with the Night Rider song by the PCP Crew. Dun 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 dun
dun